This is the Xiaomi Mi Mix Alpha, possibly the most unique and futuristic phone we have ever seen. It had a display wrapping around the entire body, a $2,800 price tag, and specs that destroyed everything. At least on paper, because we never actually got this phone. So what happened? Well, first of all, when it was announced in 2019, it was a concept phone or a prototype that was meant to showcase peak smartphone innovation. It was to push the limits and see how far into the future we can go. But did they push a little too hard and a little too deep?
What do you mean by that?
But Xiaomi was safe. They wrapped it, the screen, around the entire body, which was 7.9 inches, which is almost as big as my—
Why are you gay?
Xiaomi was in a race to achieve the highest screen to body ratio, but they took the bet a little bit too serious because it technically had 180% screen to body ratio, which makes no sense because you still had bezels on the top and the bottom, and it just kinda looks like a can of Spam. Both sides of the screens meet the ceramic strip, which had sapphire glass, which is super scratch resistant and almost as tough as diamonds. And a titanium frame, which is very lightweight and durable, which they called space metal. There were virtual buttons on the side, which sounds kind of annoying because you can't really press anything or grab anything. And because the side frames were replaced by the screen, that was used to display information like the battery percentage and notifications. So if you're waiting for your girl to respond, you'd have to hold your phone like this or like this, which doesn't matter because she's messaging another guy anyway, someone with a normal phone. Now, it did have a 108 megapixel camera, which was one of the first phones to have it. Surprisingly, that wasn't the first phone to get it was actually the Mi Note 10, which was more of a mid-range phone, about $500, which came out only a few months after the Alpha was announced. And what that actually meant is that the Mi Mix Alpha had a huge camera sensor, and depending on who you ask, size does matter, because you have more background blur. This was released about half a year before the first Ultra phone, the Mi 10 Ultra, which offered the best specs possible, so in a way, this was Xiaomi's everything. It's the best they had to offer. It wasn't created for people to buy it, it was created to be admired. Just like Benji, if you admire him, send him a hug by smashing the like. Now, right now. According to Xiaomi, they made this phone to explore the means to enter unknown regions and follow paths that no one has gone down. The path is long and winding and means we must continue to embrace the best imagination of the future. Xiaomi is a company with an engineering culture. The mission of the Mi Mix concept is to make a truly revolutionary product, regardless of the price. This is also our consumers' expectation. In other words, they're trying to make the best tech possible, regardless of the price, because it's not meant for mass production anyway. Despite how groundbreaking this phone sounded, it was quite problematic. For one, think about how fragile this phone is. If the whole phone is screen, then dropping it means there's like a 99% chance of the screen shattering, and if it's not the screen, it's your heart, because now your girl has left you for another guy, and he has a foldable. Anyway, if you break it, think about the repair costs. There you go. It would probably look a lot worse than this. You might as well lay down on the floor next to it and cry. And sure, there's technically a case for it, but it's so impractical that you might as well just accept the fact that it's fragile and just raw dog it and hope for the best. And the screen was 60 Hz, and I know this was 2019, but around that time we already had phones with like 90 Hz. But for a phone that was almost $3,000, it felt kind of outdated. Imagine a phone in 2024 with 60 Hz. What? Oh. Benji says that the iPhone 16 is still 60 Hz. Disgusting. So if you flipped your phone around, you'd have a secondary display with all your widgets. So instead of swiping once to see your weather, you'd have to flip your phone around. What? And sure, you can use that screen as a selfie preview, but that sounds kind of inconvenient. But lucky for you, my opinion doesn't matter because that was the only way to take selfies. There was no front camera. And this leads to my biggest problem. Why? Okay, it's not really a problem, but the phone had no practical use. Apart from grabbing people's attentions and looking kinda cool while charging, it was more of an inconvenience than anything useful. It had no purpose, just like you. That's why you scroll YouTube all day.
It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions. Who are you? And what do you want?
So what happened? Well, it was meant to be released in December of that year with a small scale production, but it was cancelled due to manufacturing complexities. It was likely that it didn't make sense to make this phone at all. You see, this was around the same time when Samsung released their first Galaxy Z Fold, although that bendy thing had some mixed reviews. Someone on Reddit said, "I stood in line and purchased the first Fold on launch day at the Samsung store. I then proceeded to break it. in 1 week after the purchase, I think that sums it up pretty well. It wasn't something that people rushed out to buy immediately, but it was a step in the right direction. And so around a year later in 2021, we got the Xiaomi Mi Mix Fold, which could be seen as a successor to the Mi Mix Alpha. It embodied Xiaomi's ambition to push smartphone innovation forward, but with a more practical approach, giving buyers more screen space. And speaking of space, if she asks for more space, it's game over. It's time to move on.